Soulful Sauna, Stories of Self-Mastery. Thank you for joining us. It is you, the viewer, that makes this podcast. Your host, Juliette Noske, and her guests are here to share stories of self-mastery, to inspire you and ignite the power of positive change on your own journey. Thank you for being with us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soulful Sauna podcast. And today I have a very special guest. Her name is Renata Ash. She is a powerful healer, a workshop leader, and an expert in the field of energy medicine and soul healing. She uses mythology, storytelling, sacred drumming, and ritual as a tool for healing, transformation, and personal growth. Renata has been a clear channel for the energy of Quan Yin, the Buddhist goddess of compassion, for over 15 years. And as this journey unfolds, she devotes more and more of her time and energy towards working with the divine feminine. Welcome, Renata.
Thank you, Juliette, for having me. Pleasure.
Yeah. And we have the wonderful gift of knowing each other through your beautiful husband, Stephen Ash. And I'd love to ask you, about him, as he's our connection. So why did you marry Stephen?
There's a very simple answer: love. I was married before for 10 years, and it was a good marriage, and my ex-husband was a lovely man, really. But over the years, I found he was more a friend than a partner and a lover and a husband. And I was just longing for love, for that connection between two people. That is just love. And my mother used to say, "Oh, you are just a dreamer, you never get that, just settle, you have everything you want." And I said, "No, but I know it exists." And then, I had this amazing experience on my 30th birthday. And my husband had thrown me this fantastic birthday party. And, I enjoyed myself, and I went to the toilet. And as I came out and I washed my hands, I looked in the mirror, and clear as crystal, this voice said to me, "If you stay in this marriage, you'll be dead in 5 years' time." And I was like, wow, I sort of walked out of the toilet in a complete daze. Half a year later, I was divorced. And that was, and 5 years later, I met Stephen. And it's not that those 5 years were all sort of honey and sweet, because I was looking and I doubted myself. I thought, well, have I been a fool, to give up everything that I had? And even meeting Stephen was the most incredible experience, because you could not dream it up. Do you want to hear about it?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Well, I was at the time studying medicine in Vienna, and I had a boyfriend, but again, it wasn't what I wanted. And so I had separated from him, but he was very persistent. And I thought, I need to get out of here, I need to have a break. So I phoned a good friend of mine in the UK, a healer. And I said, "Look, William, I need to get out of here. Do you know anywhere I can go, because I just need some peace and quiet?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got exactly the place for you, But before you go there, you need to come with me to the National Federation of Spiritual Healers annual conference, which was held in Bexhill." And at the time, I thought I'd been doing healing, but I didn't regard myself as a healer, you know. I sort of could put my hands on someone and they would feel better, but I didn't think much about it. So I said, well, yeah, okay, you know, I'll go with you. And we came to this conference house in Bexhill, and William, being the chairman of this organization, he had a place for me, a chair in the front row, and I was sitting there, and there was a chair free beside me. I mean, the hall was packed, you know. And I was thinking, it's weird, isn't it? And then suddenly I see William do this, you know, beckoning someone, and I look back, and there is Stephen, you know, popping down the stairs, and William says, there, you know, sit down there. And so he sat down beside me. Now, what's the chance of that? You know, that I would be over there at that time and that we would meet that way. And then we've been together now for 36 years. You know, so my advice to anyone who is looking for love, it would be, don't give up. Don't give up. You know, if that is such a desire, such a longing in your heart, then you know, you have to follow it.
Yes. And I think what I've learned personally is that it's waiting for the divine design, for the divine time to arise. And, you know, often we want to rush it. We want it to be now, or we want it to be a specific time. But there is a divine timing. There is a natural unfolding, isn't there?
Always is. And, you know, as I got older, I became more patient. But at that time, you know, I was in my 30s. And I thought, well, it's going to happen, you know, right around the corner. And it wasn't. And I was, for 5 years, I was really searching, you know, and then I stopped searching because I thought, well, if it's meant to be, that someone will find me, you know, it's not my searching. And it was that, you know, as you can see, I mean, you know, I couldn't have orchestrated that in a million years, you know, but that was where spirit said, where the divine said, now you're ready. You know? Yeah.
I'd love to go back to something that you said that stood out to me as well, which is that point where you've made a decision and you had that voice call out to you, and then you have that doubt. And it's very natural, isn't it? It's a very natural part of the decision making, and it can cause us to jump back into something that's not necessarily beneficial for us. How did you make your way through that doubt?
I think for once it was the reaction of the world around me, because my husband is an excellent doctor. He's a cardiologist. You know, he was so well known in the town where we lived, which was my birth town, and everyone knew me, my family, you know, part of the establishment. And so I'm the first one who gets divorced. And I cannot tell you how things changed with that. You know, there were all the people who before were like, oh, you know, like this. Now, when they saw me walking down the street, they would cross to the other side. So they didn't have to talk with me, you know, because I was kind of branded as an outsider now, you know. But this just made me more determined, because I thought, no, you know, I'm not going to give into that pressure of a society that is so false, you know, where, you know, so many couples have problems, you know, and they have affairs all around, and they pretend this happy family. I could have pretended, but, you know, it was those words, you will be dead. And I don't know whether it would have been a physical death. I think I might have gotten ill, but something would have died within me. And so I just kept going, you know. And I picked myself up, you know, every time I got sort of fell down, and no, you know. I so believed in my dream that real love, true love, was possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like, I often think now, we just, we just had our 36th wedding anniversary, and we were thinking about these words, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health. And God knows, we've gone through all of that,
Mm.
When you love each other, when there's this soul connection, so like that's your soulmate, then you go through it together. And I think if it's not, you break up, because the pressure is unsustainable.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, congratulations for 36 years. That's wonderful. And I mean, like you say, you know, there are a lot of relationships that maybe continue even though the people aren't happy and maybe don't even want to be there. But luckily you have, had that length of time wanting to be there and working together, which is wonderful. And you spoke there about, walking down the street and people crossing over because of the decision that you'd made. And, if we think about it, divorce, it's something that has been acceptable for only a short amount of
Yeah.
time. And but not just that, it's this idea of the society, the people around you not accepting you, and you being a bit of a trailblazer, I guess, a bit of a pioneer, a bit of a rebel, yes, of course. And I think on our journeys of self-mastery, there are those moments where we do need to be that rebel, that path maker, trailblazer. And obviously you had strength to make that choice and to continue on your path. What gave you that strength, do you think?
Because I listened to my heart.
Mm.
I think when you go through the experiences that I had, really people who used to be friends, it makes you very lonely, because suddenly you have lost all your reference points. I moved away then from the town. I wouldn't have stayed there for anything. But I think it was that in my heart I knew that I was doing the right thing. And I reckon that this kind of strength only can come from the heart. It can't come from the head. The head will start its logic and, oh no, maybe that would be better. And I don't know. The heart, if you really become still and go within and ask your heart, what is the right thing to do? Is this the right thing for me? And for me, the answer persistently was yes. And even in our marriage, if there had ever been a point where I wouldn't have, or either of us wouldn't have been in this marriage with the heart, with all of our heart, I think we would have been honest and said, no, it has served its purpose and now it's time to part ways. But it hasn't, and I don't think, well, I pray that it continues like this. Because there are challenges. Even when you love yourself so deeply, there are challenges. There are difficulties. But if you have that love in your heart and you listen to your heart, I don't think you can go wrong.
Thank you. I think also there's a lot of people question, how do I tune in to myself and have challenges, I guess, trusting that. And I think where there's the quiet whisper of the intuition and the heart, the head can be quite loud. So it's often those next steps of then actually following that guidance from the heart that can be challenging.
Yeah. And let's be honest, you don't always get it right.
I know.
Sometimes you can't discern between that quiet, truthful voice and the other one that's shouting at you, you know. But I think always the heart doesn't blame. The heart doesn't make you feel stupid. You know, the heart is always encouraging. It will say very clearly, no, that's not, you know, go that other way. When I ask.
Yeah. It doesn't need to justify or reason either.
No.
Just knows.
Yeah. And you know, I think my feeling is, my take on this is that the heart is really the spokesperson for the soul. You know, the heart links us to the soul, and the soul has a plan for us, in lack of a better word, and that plan is to grow, maximum growth. You know, that's what the soul wants, and this body is the vehicle through which that growth happens. And the heart translates, for me, the messages from the soul. You know, so if something feels completely off, but I would be inclined to do it because it feels very sensible in my head, then I have to pay attention. You know. But I think it's that difference between a loving voice and another voice that constantly tells you, you're just an idiot, you know, what are you doing? How can you be so stupid? You know, all this, isn't it? Yeah. I had that up to here, yeah.
Yeah. So you're obviously quite self-aware. When did your self-mastery journey begin, do you think? Is there a moment in your life where you really recognize that that was a pillar for, or a poignant moment for your beginning?
Well, I mean, the deciding moment I think I talked about in this mirror experience, you know, that is kind of like when you hear something so clearly and it made absolute sense. That's the other thing. It felt, yes, you know, that's it. And then you can't help, I think, but go for it. But then, you know, throughout my life, there were so many times when I had to learn how to hold myself up and how to go through things that were really, really hard. You know, I mean, I had one ectopic pregnancy just when we got married, you know, which nearly killed me. Then I had a little baby girl was born too early. You know, she couldn't survive, and she couldn't survive because we were in a local hospital that didn't have the facilities for a neonatal care unit. You know, so things like that, how do you deal with that? You know, where there is a resentment that creeps in. You know, why couldn't we have been in London? Why didn't they airlift us up to one of the specialist hospitals? You know, and in a way, it's like accepting that there is a higher power at work, you know, and that little baby, she lived for two hours about, you know, and it was the whole thing was so strange because I thought I was going into labor, so I phoned my GP and he said, no, Braxton Hicks contractions. I said, I don't think so. Oh, yeah, of course, So, 2 hours later, I'm in full-blown labor, and I call him again, and he comes and he says, well, I think you should have been in the hospital by now. And I said, well, so we went in, raced in. I was put on this drip, and overnight, and Stephen was sitting beside me, and by the morning, the contractions had kind of almost stopped. And I'd been talking to this baby all the time, and I said, look, what do you want? And the answer was, I want to live. And I said, okay, well then you need to hold on as well. I'm doing the best here, but you need to hold on yourself. And then in the morning, everything seemed to have calmed down. And Stephen said, I'm just going to go home and have a shower and I'll be back. And as I'm lying there in that hospital bed on my own, I can feel the contractions creeping back in, And then the doctor comes and she examines me and she says, I think it's coming back. And I said, well, yes, I think so too, Would you please call my husband to come in as fast as he can? And I talked again to the baby, and she said, just let me go now. Just let me go. And it was, the quickest birth I've ever experienced. It was just, almost snap of a finger. And the doctors had told me that she wasn't developed enough and she wouldn't have had enough oxygen. I thought she was dead. So, as the midwife walks off with the baby to have her assessed and whatever, and I'm just in shock in my bed. And then she comes back with this little bundle and she says, and I didn't know it was a girl because I was was seriously expecting it to be a boy. And she said, do you want to meet your daughter? And I said, no, no, I can't, And she said, but I think you have to. And she put that little bundle in my arm. And then, of course, everything broke loose in me. And then I saw the little hand twitch and the leg. And I'm shouting, I'm saying, look, she's still alive, do something, just do something. And they take her again, they bring her back and say, there's nothing we can do. And so we held on to this little person for about 2 hours. Her hand wrapped around Stephen's thumb, and we just held on with her until, she said it was like she had gotten off the bus just for a very short visit, and then she went on her way, And we insisted with the hospital that we wanted to have a funeral, and normally she was 6.5 months. So nowadays she would have a good chance to live. At that time, not, and she was a beautiful, beautiful little girl, really. And I said, I don't want her to go into a plastic bag, and be incinerated. I want the funeral. And they were very good with that. They organized that. And we had this funeral. And then we were waiting outside the crematorium because I wanted to take her ashes. And as we saw all this smoke going up, smoke clouds. And in my inner vision, I could see a little girl just skipping through the garden of remembrance, the rose garden, And then this man comes out and he says, yes, what do you want? And I said, I would like the ash of my daughter. And his face fell and he said, oh dear, did no one tell you? And I said, tell me what? And he said, with babies that young, there is nothing that's left. And I thought, wow, she's just gone up in smoke, And that was then that experience with Rosie. I think it was the catalyst for us to sort of create the rainbow essences, which that just followed on. It was a really, again, very strange thing. So there were a lot of things happening that you can't explain, but to that inner world, they make total sense.
Yeah. And they say that through the most challenging times or traumas that we experience come the greatest gift.
Yeah, I do believe that.
Yeah.
They come in disguise sometimes, But
Yeah.
but that's the blessing of hindsight. I think if you live long enough, you can look back and you see that what you at the time thought was horrible and terrible and unbearable has become a really great blessing.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for being, so open and raw and generous.
I think there are many people, many women who go through that, and the thing is, if you lose a child because she's born prematurely, it's almost like it doesn't matter. It's of no significance because but she was fully grown. She was just very tiny and her lungs couldn't cope. And I think to know that you have that connection, and that gift remains with you always. I mean, I have two beautiful children, a daughter and a son, and they are the most amazing people. And in between was Rosie. And our son, who's the second born, or the third one actually, isn't it? When he was a baby, when he was a toddler, he would insist that we lay a plate on the table for Rosie. He would insist. He said, she wants to be here. And I could feel it myself. But it was John who really had that recognition. He was still so open in his perception, that he said, Mum, we need to do that, So every meal for, I don't know, a year, 1.5 years, we had a place set for Rosie. And she's always been there, she was never forgotten.
Did she come after your son or before your son?
No, before I had my daughter, then there was Rosie. And the reason why I thought she would be a boy was because we had this prediction that we would have 2 children, a girl and a boy. So we'd already had the girl. So I was fully expecting this to be a boy. But the strange thing was that my sister-in-law got pregnant at the same time. And she lost her baby, and that was a boy. And she was expecting a girl because she'd had 3 girls already. So she thought, well, another girl. And the name that she had chosen for that girl was Rosie. And when I was asked by that midwife, she said, what name are you giving your daughter? And the only name I could think of was Rosie. She's Rosie. So I don't pretend to understand the way life works. It's really, sometimes it's mind-boggling, and just marvel at actually intricacies of life and how that all flows and intermingles.
Mm. So when did you choose to tell your son about Rosie?
Well, I think we didn't mention much. He was a seer. I think he could still be one if he chose to, but at the moment, it's like he is. He's not focusing on that, but I think he is a very gifted seer. So is my daughter. But I think he came up with this. We need to have another place setting on the table for you. And he was always talking about the sister. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not really something that you discuss greatly with your children, isn't it? I mean, Joy knew she was 2.5 when Rosie was born, or 2 when she was born. Yeah. But John only found out afterwards that he had a sister who was an angel. Yeah, that's how we like to call it, an angel daughter.
Yeah. And I would love to hear more about your work with Quan Yin, talking about angels. Yeah, you've been channeling her for over 15 years.
Yeah, I do call myself a reluctant channel because sometimes the intellect, that ego mind just interferes badly, and that was what it was with me. I have always been in contact with people who channel, and so it was. I had been, or a woman in America had been recommended, and she was channeling a Chinese master, and I thought, wow, sounds interesting. Let's see what this being has for me in advice. And so I made this appointment. It was on the phone, and it was, and this, I can't remember what he was called, but it was all really spot on, and it was interesting. Suddenly the energy changed, and it was palpable. And I'm thinking, what's going on now? Is she all right on the other end of the phone? And then the voice is a very different voice, very soft voice, and she says, I have always been with you. You are my eyes and my hands, and I think she said her name. I'm not entirely sure now. Anyway, or maybe the woman afterwards said. And then it became very, very quiet, very, very quiet. I couldn't hear properly. And then the woman said, I have to stop now. I can't handle it anymore, And I think she said that was Quan Yin at the end. And at that time, neither did I know who Quan Yin was. I hadn't been sort of researching any Eastern traditions. And my thing was, what does it mean? What does it mean? I am the hands and the eyes of Quan Yin. What is that? And then I let it go. And then Stephen's brother David, he had been traveling in the East, and he and his wife had found a temple where they were sewing. Where they were conducting, let's put it that way, conducting Sabai ceremonies. And Sabai means a blessing, so they are blessing ceremonies. And they work in a way that sacred cloth shawls are being made, handmade, sewn with prayers and songs to a particular deity. And David and his wife were tasked by this monk, who said, I've been waiting for you for ages, this needs to go into the West, into the Western world. And he was initiated, and he was taught how to do that. So he brought back 4 sabais. I think it was a black one, which is like holds the energy of the source, a red one, which is Shakti, and a green one, which was Shiva, and the white one. And the white one was Quan Yin. And so he visits us. Must have been several years after that channeling. I'd all forgotten. And he says, I really have this feeling. I need to give you this Quan Yin Sabai. And I said, and what am I to do with it? And he said, well, I'll teach you to do Sabai ceremonies. And so he said, I need to get this Sabai back from my ex-wife, who wanted to keep this one. So I'm thinking, yeah, like you do. And then I think, I don't know, a few months later, there's a parcel in the post, and there's this beautiful white cloth, And well, then, things started. So David instructed me, he said, oh, you just put it on and, and you see what happens. And my first Sabai ceremony was with about 80 people, So he said, you just give them Quan Yin's blessing. And I felt this urge, this guidance from within, a very, very strong, that I had to go to each person and touch them and say, this is the blessing of Quan Yin. And you have no idea how hard that was for me, because I'm a very brain-orientated person. And this thing up there was saying, are you nuts? What are you doing? You can't go to people whom you have never met and touch them and say, this is a blessing from Quan Yin. And yet I could not stop. And so over the years, I've done more and more Sabai ceremonies. And I think through grace, that voice is becoming, or has become, more and more quiet. It doesn't interfere now. So I'm a much clearer channel, because I don't have to fight this part of me that says, I've lost it. And it's like, I think that was the hands, the touching was always there, the hands. And I really seriously feel it's not my hands. It's not my energy that flows out. But then I got the instruction that I have to keep my eyes open. And that was another hurdle, because it's all right to do this when you don't look at people. But when you look them in the eye, and you have to make yourself empty enough to allow that something else to come through, that was quite a step up, So that's where we are right now. People get this energy, in the most direct and the most clear way that I can handle. And it is beautiful. There's always so much peace afterwards. It is as if someone had put a hand on your heart and said, it's okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is so precious nowadays, isn't it? To be able to let go of that kind of haversack of burdens and concerns and duties that we all carry, and to just be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe when I'm in England sometime, we'll meet up.
Yes. I can already feel the energy of Quan Yin. I love Quan Yin as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're when you speak there, it's you can really sense how your journey has taken you. We often have our own plans. Actually, if we open up to what is unfolding in life, it leads us to where we need to go.
Yeah, it does. We are, my feeling is that we are going to be taken there whether we like it or not. But there is a little trick, and the trick is to not resist, to not fight it. I've been such a fighter in my life, and it's only really been, recently when Stephen had a heart attack out of the blue. He had problems suddenly because he's an incredibly fit man, you know, and an active man. And we have a really good diet. So I thought, never in a million years, you know, is something going to be wrong with the heart. And then suddenly, you know, he can't breathe very well and he can't walk very well. And, you know, they find that his coronary arteries are really, you know, very narrow. And so he had to go into the hospital for an angiogram. And he had this massive heart attack on the table whilst they were doing that, you know, and they had to resuscitate him for 20 minutes. He was gone. And the blessing was that they had the heart-lung machine and they could keep the blood pumping to his brain. But I was waiting, you know, I was waiting on the ward thinking, well, you know, the doctor said 3/4 of an hour. So, well, now it's 1.5 hours. Well, maybe, you know, there's a bit of a delay. And I was asking the nurse and you know, saying, well, have you any news? What's happening? And she was a bit evasive. Well, you know, there's a lot of going on down there now, you know. And as I'm pacing up and down, I can feel this. Do you know how you feel, what people think when they look at you? You can feel it in your back. Like I was walking and I felt this energy of pity, you know, like, oh dear, you know. And I also felt in that walking up and down, suddenly I felt this, oh, you know, and I'm thinking, oh, something is wrong, you know, something is wrong. But then I thought, no, I'm just hysterical. I just, no, everything is fine, everything is fine. And then I feel these strange energies, you know, of pity in my back. The ward doctor comes to me and she says, your husband is in intensive care. And I'm saying, what is he doing in intensive care? He's only had an angiogram. Oh, she said, well, you know, the surgeon will explain it all to you. Best you go over there to the, you know, intensive care and wait outside and she'll come. And I'm sitting, you know, and thinking, oh, what on earth is this? And then the surgeon comes and it was an all-women team who saved my husband, all women. And she looked as grey as a wall, you know, absolutely exhausted. And she said, you know, that was on a hair's breadth that we were able to save him. She said, I don't know, she said, I don't know whether he will have brain damage or anything like that. You know, at the moment, we have put him into an artificial coma. And you can go and, you know, we'll clean him up and then you can go and see him. And so, you know, it's about a couple of hours later, I was allowed to go in, you know. And there's my husband, you know, with intubated and, yeah. And all I could do was pray, you know, and put my hands on him because that's all I knew what to do in the moment, you know. And then, you know, on the day, then they said, they were, after 2 days or so, they said they were going to wake him up now, you know, bring him out of the coma. And my son and I, we were both in that because they were really nice. They allowed us to go in. It was COVID time. And we were there, you know, and Stephen had his eyes open, you know, and the first thing he said to me, with this stuff still in his throat, he said, I love you, you know, I love you. And the doctor said, we have to keep him on the ventilator for a while because his breathing is not strong enough yet, you know. And I remember putting my hands over his chest and praying, you know, please, you know, please let him, you know, let him heal. And so we go home and the children went for a walk and I was in the bath and the phone rings. And you know how when the phone rings in such a situation, you think, oh my God, you know. So I storm out of the bath and I pick up the phone and there's the nurse and she says, I just wanted to let you know that, you know, the breathing just picked up and we have taken the tube out, and your husband wants to talk to you, you know. And I tell you, I collapsed in front of my Quan Yin altar, and I just said, thank you, thank you for giving him back to me, And I think, there's been such a blessing in this, because there is a gratitude that for him, for his presence, that wasn't there to that extent before.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the huge things, isn't it, that you can take from these moments is a sense of gratitude. And I know that that's hard for some people to do, because in these moments, the various challenges that you've had in your life, sometimes it can turn people the other way, where they lose complete faith. But yeah, so now you have a new lease of life, a new gratefulness.
I think we have some time left to do the things that are really important to us, which is, to work with people from the heart. That's where it's at. I don't care what kind of technique or tools or practices anyone has. If the heart is not there, I think they become useless in this time.
Yeah.
Because the only thing that will turn our world around is really that. It's the heart. The solutions are not there anymore in the head. No matter how much we are made to believe that they are. This is what it is.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's why I'm here with this podcast as well, is to continue to share these stories with others. So let me ask you, do you have a sauna story?
Oh, I knew that had to come at some point. Well, I don't go to the sauna very much anymore. I don't know why. I felt, it's somehow I didn't find the right one, and so on and so forth. But I tell you what, well, I tell you a story about a different sauna, a spiritual sauna, and a sweat lodge sauna. And in a way, it's a very similar thing, except you do it with so much awareness. You go into this kind of beehive like thing that is completely dark inside, and you crawl in, and it's symbolic for crawling into the womb of Mother Earth, and you sit there in complete darkness, and there are heated stones that glow in the center of this circle, and and you make prayers, and you allow yourself to be cleansed, not just by the sweat that pours off you, like mad, but also of anything energetic and inner stuff that you're ready to let go. And I had the great fortune, after a very, very difficult start with a guy who was too ambitious with this, and wasn't a pleasure, wasn't really good. I had friends of ours invited us to come to a sweat lodge with Grandfather Wallace Black Elk, and he was one of the last great medicine men of the Lakota people, and of course we did, and so I think we talked to, because I was, a bit, I don't know. So anyway, so he had us sitting in this huge sweat lodge he made, huge, or he had us make a huge sweat lodge. And we're sitting in two rows, women on one side, man on the other. And I tell you what, it was extraordinary. I was sitting there, and it was as if the top of the lodge was suddenly open, and there was this spirit wind coming in, you know. I saw the stars. I think I saw the stars. And as I looked down to Grandfather Wallace, he had these sticks with which he was receiving the, you know, the glowing red hot stones into the lodge. And those sticks were dancing. And I was sitting there, you know, normally you would think, wow. You know? And I was there and I looked at him and I thought, yeah, the sticks are dancing. You know, it was like, yeah, it's all totally normal. And he had this ability to make the extraordinary seem totally normal. So that my little mind could just compute that and say, yeah, that's what is happening. And it, you know, you can't kind of top that, can you? To have that experience with someone who is, yeah, such a powerful medicine man.
Yeah. And I think in the contrary to that, they also make the ordinary seem extraordinary.
They can do that as well. Yes.
Mm.
Yes. And you never know what you're going to encounter. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
No, I'm hugely grateful to him.
Yeah. He sounds like an amazing man.
He was. And, you know, the little games he played with people to find out who they were. Because when you meet such a person, you know, everyone is like at their best behavior, and, you know, he plays these games, and it's like, I want to know your heart. I want to know who you really are.
Mm.
And we underwent one such test, and it was really hard, you know. And, you know, I don't know whether there's time to tell that story, but I you know, otherwise, anyway. But at the end of it, you know, he adopted us as his spiritual grandchildren. You know, and I realized later on that he was really testing us. You know, what would we do?
Yeah.
Because he was a very clear seer. You would have never thought it, you know, but he saw so clearly. And he turned around in the car and he said, you know, I would like to adopt you as my spiritual grandchildren. So past that one.
I think we can definitely come back and hear more stories from you. I'd love to have you on the podcast again. Definitely.
Would love to.
Yeah. And maybe even the both of you together, Stephen and yourself together. What I would love is, do you have any parting words for our guests at the end of today's podcast?
Don't lose hope. Do not lose hope. Even when everything looks completely lost and you are lost and you think, I don't know how, you know, keep the hope alive. Keep them. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Renata. It's been wonderful speaking with you.
For me too, Juliette. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Soulful Sauna podcast. We appreciate your continued support. Feel free to leave us a rating, share with your family, friends, and loved ones. I have a question to leave you with. What inspired you from today's podcast, and what actions are you going to take as a result? Time to tell your own story of self-mastery.